Chuck Norris walked into a music store, just in time to see a snarky teen challenge a boomer to a guitar battle. What he didn't know, that boomer was Eric Clapton. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and follow for more powerful stories that will stay with you. Now, let's begin. Kid plays fast, the store owner muttered, wiping down a dusty fender with a worn-out rag. But I don't hear nothing in it. The music shop sat on the corner of Main and Willow, tucked between a shuttered barber shop and a florist that still sold carnations like it was 1972. Inside, it smelled like old wood, new strings, and the faint buzz of amps long past their prime. Warm light came through the front windows in crooked stripes, landing on the scuffed-up floor that creaked more than it didn't. It was a slow Tuesday. Quiet, like always. Then the door opened. Not once. 3 times in the span of a minute. The first was a teenage boy, about 16, maybe 17. Hoodie half-zipped, black metal band tee underneath, baseball cap turned backward like it was glued to his head. He walked in like he'd just won something, made a beeline for the electric guitars, picked the shiniest one off the wall and plugged it into the amp like he was on stage already. He didn't just play, he performed. His fingers flew across the fretboard like he had something to prove. The amp crackled under the strain. There was tapping, bending, whammy bar dives. Loud, sharp, showy. He pulled faces with every note like the music was dragging something deep out of him. 2 of his buddies followed him in, phones already out, recording. One of them mouthed, "Bros killing it," like they were watching the second coming of Eddie Van Halen. The second person to walk in didn't make a sound. Old guy. Silver hair, rolled up sleeves, soft steps. He wore a faded button-down and jeans worn out at the knees. His shoes looked like they'd been places, but still had some miles left in them. No guitar case, no fuss. He went straight to the acoustic section, picked up a wooden dreadnought, sat down quietly, and started testing a few chords. Nothing flashy, just playing. The third man came in about 10 seconds later, tall, broad-shouldered, in a cowboy hat and dark sunglasses. Chuck Norris. Nobody said his name, but everyone recognized him. He didn't say a word. Just walked over to the drum kits like a man on a mission. Chuck was retired now. No movies, no stunts. Did a little consulting, showed up at charity events when it made sense. Most days he just lived slow and enjoyed time with his grandkids. He was at the shop to buy a small electric drum set for his youngest grandson. That was all. Then he heard the kid. The solo ended in a high-pitched squeal as the teen yanked on the whammy bar like it owed him money. He held the final note longer than needed, let it ring, then muted it with a smack of his palm. He stepped back from the amp, nodding to himself, looking like a man who expected fireworks. Few polite claps, a cough somewhere, nothing wild. The kid grinned anyway. "Nobody plays like that anymore," he announced to no one and everyone. "That's real music. Fast, technical, clean. Not that dusty old blues crap. That stuff's ancient. We've evolved, man." He said it loud enough to carry. That's when he noticed the old man across the room, still sitting, still strumming something soft. The teen squinted. "Yo!" he called out, pointing with his pick. "You playing over there? Or just tuning that thing to sleep?" A couple of his buddies laughed. "You know what that sounds like?" The teen went on, sauntering over, guitar still hanging from his shoulder like a badge, like the background music in an old folks' home. The old man didn't respond, just kept picking at the strings, eyes down, calm as ever. The teen stopped a few feet away, arms folded. "No offense," he said, in the tone people use when they're about to be as offensive as possible. "But that quiet, soft, feelings stuff, nobody's listening to that anymore." Still no reply. "You gotta play with power, you know? Grab the guitar by the neck and make it say something. That's what people want to hear. Big sound, big energy, not lullabies." Another laugh from the corner. The boy kept going. "I mean, what are you even playing? Is that like folk? Blues? Jazz?" He made a face. Come on, man. That stuff's dead. People want speed now. Double picking, shredding, wild solos, heavy distortion. That's what makes it real. You should try it sometime. The old man finally looked up. Didn't speak. Just looked. And in that one look, there wasn't anger or annoyance, just stillness. The kind that doesn't get rattled easy. Chuck Norris, meanwhile, stood by the snare drums, arms crossed, not saying a word, but his eyebrows went up just a little. Then came the challenge. Tell you what, the teen said, grinning like he already knew the ending. You and me. Solo battle. I'll go first. You go second. Loser buys the winner a set of strings. A few folks perked up. One guy near the counter whispered, "He's really doing this." The old man exhaled through his nose, not tired, not frustrated, just thoughtful. Then he gave a small nod. All right, the teen said, bouncing on his toes. Let's see what Grandpa's got. He walked back to the amp, twisted the knob up a notch. The room filled with that low electric hum. Thick, restless, ready. Chuck turned toward the sound but stayed where he was, watching. The kid stood with both feet planted like he was getting ready to bring the house down. He cracked his knuckles one at a time, shook out his fingers like he'd seen in a video somewhere, then leaned in toward the amp and cranked the volume another 2 notches. You ready, Grandpa? He called out, not waiting for an answer. Try and keep up. The old man didn't say a thing, just looked at him. Calm, not smiling, not scowling, just still. That kind of look either meant you were too old to care, or you'd seen enough life to not be bothered. But the boy didn't see it that way. He mistook that silence for fear. He rolled his shoulders and turned back to the crowd, what little there was. A few folks were standing near the entrance now. Others had peeked over from the back where the vinyl records were. Chuck Norris was still by the drum kits, arms crossed, watching everything like he was sizing up a fight. All right, the boy said, tapping the body of the guitar with his knuckles. Let's give him a show. And he started. It came in loud, real loud. The opening note blasted through the amp, sharp enough to make one guy in the corner flinch. Then came the flurry, tapping, shredding, fingers flying up and down the neck like a storm. His hand barely touched the frets before it was on the next note, sweeping fast, jumping strings, hammer-ons, pull-offs, slaps. Every trick he knew, he used it, whether the song needed it or not. He spun halfway as he played, like he was on a stage in front of 10,000 people, not standing in a 30-year-old music shop on a quiet weekday afternoon. He bounced his head in time with the notes, scrunched his face like he was channeling some deep pain, even though the song, if you could call it that, didn't seem to have any soul at all. It was all speed, all noise. The younger folks looked impressed. A few held up their phones. One guy in his 20s let out a woo during a particularly fast run. But the older folks? They didn't clap. They just watched. Chuck narrowed his eyes. He'd seen that kind of performance before, not on a stage, but in locker rooms, sparring matches, and auditions, when a kid thought making noise was the same as making a point. The boy finished with a full dive on the whammy bar, letting the note screech until the amp hissed. He stepped back like he'd just lit a fire, lifted his arms, and smiled wide. The room was quiet, save for a few claps and one whistle. That, he said, panting slightly, is how you play guitar. He turned toward the old man. Your move, old-timer, he said, not even hiding the sarcasm. But you might want to stretch first. Wouldn't want you pulling something. The old man still didn't speak, still didn't move. The kid chuckled. Hey, it's okay if you want to back out, he added, shrugging. I mean, I get it. Not everyone's built for this kind of playing. I'm what you'd call next generation. You probably learned back in the day when guitars only had 4 notes. Some laughter behind him, not much, but enough to keep him grinning. You ever heard of speed picking? He continued. No, didn't think so. That stuff wasn't around in the old blues days, was it? He looked around the store, like waiting for someone to confirm he was right. No one did. Most just stayed quiet. The old man gently rested his hand on the neck of the guitar, but didn't raise it, didn't rush, didn't flinch. Chuck took a slow step closer to the counter, leaned in, and said under his breath to the clerk, "You sure you don't know who that man is?" The clerk just shrugged. "Not a clue. He comes in sometimes. Kinda quiet." Chuck didn't answer. He just kept watching. The kid, meanwhile, had walked over to his friends, high-fived one of them, then leaned back against the amp like the king of the hill. "Come on, Gramps," he called across the room. "Don't keep us waiting. I still got time for round 2 if you're brave enough." Still, no response. The old man checked one tuning peg. One click, then silence again. And the boy? He just laughed. "Guess I already won, huh?" Chuck had seen a lot in his years. Action scenes gone wrong, real fights break out on set. Even a man once knocked himself out trying to show off a roundhouse kick he barely understood. But this was different. The store had gone quiet after the boy's flashy solo. A couple claps here and there, but it wasn't the reaction he wanted. You could see it in his face. The grin didn't land like he expected. The swagger in his step slowed just a little. Chuck, still leaning on the drum display, let out a breath and muttered, "He's fast, but he ain't saying nothing." The old man stepped forward. He walked slow, not because he was weak, but because he wasn't in any rush. His hands were steady. He didn't nod, didn't acknowledge the challenge, just adjusted the strap of his guitar, stood center floor in front of a small amp, and let his fingers touch the strings like he was greeting an old friend. The guitar was a simple Stratocaster. Nothing custom, just wood, wire, and years. He didn't plug it in yet. He started dry, clean, bare, just fingers and fretboard. The first note rang out, low and warm, held for just a breath longer than expected. Then the next, and the next. He wasn't playing a song you could hum. There wasn't a chorus. There weren't any fireworks. But there was story. Each bend had weight. Each slide felt lived in. There were pauses, intentional ones, that said more than the notes themselves. The boy didn't smile now. His arms hung loose at his sides. His mouth was closed. Chuck had stopped leaning. His arms were crossed now, eyes narrowed. One of the shop employees, who'd been texting behind the register, slowly put his phone down and turned. A woman near the wall whispered, "My God, I haven't heard something like that since..." She didn't finish the sentence. The old man kept going, quiet and slow, letting the sound stretch out and hang in the air like dust in sunlight. He wasn't showing off. He was remembering. Then he stopped. Not abruptly, but gently, like setting down a glass of water that had been full for too long. He looked up. Nobody spoke. Not a word. Then, slowly, he reached over, plugged the cable into the Strat, and flicked on the amp. There was a soft pop and a hum. He didn't adjust the knobs. And then, he changed. Same guitar, same hands, different fire. The first notes came sharp, clear, but they carried weight. They punched, but didn't shout. They sang, not with volume, but with truth. And then, something strange happened. He began to play the exact same solo the boy had played, note for note. Same sequence, same pacing, same speed, but different. Each run of his fingers felt grounded. Each trill had flavor. Where the boy had sped through like a runaway train, the old man drove it. Controlled, confident. The tapping came smooth but carried phrasing. The sweeping picked up and dropped off like wind pushing through trees. Even the whammy dive at the end came with more tone, more bite, more purpose. People in the room slowly looked at each other, jaws open. The guy filming on his phone whispered, "Wait, that's the same solo." "No, it's not," said the older man beside him. "That's how it should sound." When the final note faded, The old man muted the strings with his palm, took a step back, and let his hands fall to his sides. It was done. The boy didn't move. Chuck did. He walked forward, slow and sure, stopped just a few feet away, looked at the old man. "Tell me I'm not crazy," he said. "You're Eric Clapton." The old man gave the smallest smile, soft, like a memory you don't share out loud. He didn't say yes, but he didn't have to. Chuck nodded, then turned to the boy. "Kid," he said, his voice low and measured, "you just challenged a man who made guitars cry and heal people before your parents probably met." The boy swallowed hard. The grin was long gone. His hands were still on his guitar, but his fingers looked unsure now, like they didn't trust themselves. The old man turned toward him. He didn't come close, just looked, then spoke, for the first time. "You've got hands," he said, voice quiet but steady. "Fast ones." The boy blinked. "But speed," the man continued, "only works when you've got something worth saying." He let that hang there. "Your notes were right. Your fingers were sharp. But your playing?" He tapped his chest gently. "Didn't come from here." The boy's eyes dropped. "Music's not a race," Clapton said. "It's not a contest. It's a conversation." He stepped forward, just a little. "You've got fire, that's good. But fire without control?" He gave a slight shake of his head. "It burns out fast." The boy didn't say anything. His face had lost all color. "And one more thing," Clapton said, almost kindly. "If you're gonna play loud, make sure there's a reason for it." Silence again. The boy stood there, still as stone. Chuck stepped over and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "He ain't breaking you down, kid," he said. "He's giving you a door." The boy looked up. His lips parted, like he wanted to say something, maybe argue, maybe cry, but nothing came out. The old man gave a small nod, then stepped back. He didn't wait for thanks, didn't look for approval. Clapton had just unplugged his cable when the boy's voice cut through the silence. "Wait!" Heads turned. The boy was still standing by the amp, breathing hard, sweat glistening along his forehead. His hands were clenched around his guitar neck like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "You didn't win!" he shouted, louder than he probably meant to. "I want another shot." Clapton paused. He didn't turn around right away. Chuck let out a quiet sigh. He'd seen this before, the moment when pride starts kicking and swinging because it's drowning. The boy stepped forward. "You didn't beat me," he said again, voice shaking. "You just caught me off guard, that's all." Clapton turned to face him. No expression, no challenge in his eyes. But that silence, that calm, it lit a fire the boy wasn't ready to control. "I can do better," the kid snapped, shoving his cord back into the amp. "I'm not gonna let some old man show me up like that." The tension in the room changed. What had been awe, reverence, now tilted back toward discomfort. But nobody stopped him. He grabbed his pick, flicked it twice between his fingers like it was magic, then locked eyes with Clapton. "One more round?" Clapton gave a slight nod, barely there, then stepped back, letting his arms rest gently at his sides. The boy turned back to his amp, rolled the volume up again, this time almost all the way. The hum was louder now, buzzing beneath the surface like a bad idea you couldn't ignore. He didn't breathe before he played. He just jumped in. The first notes came out blazing, faster, louder, harder. He pushed every run to the edge, finger tapping across the neck, doubling down on the speed, bending strings with so much force they nearly cracked. It wasn't music anymore. It was noise. Desperate, scattered, forced. His hand started to slip just a little. One note hit too flat. Then another got swallowed by distortion. He clenched his jaw, pushed harder, tried to bring it back, but the more he forced it, the less control he had. His shirt was soaked now. Sweat dripped from his temple. His fingers trembled. Chuck looked down. He didn't smile, didn't shake his head, just stared. "He's panicking," a man nearby whispered. "No," Chuck said quietly. He's drowning. Fighting with himself. Then came the ending. A furious whammy dive. Strings pulled hard, amp screaming. The boy held it until the amp cut out, too strained to keep pushing sound. He stepped back, gasping, wiped his brow, looked around. No one clapped. A man near the vinyl section muttered, "There's no heart in that." Chuck didn't respond, but he gave a slow nod. The boy looked around the room, searching for something. Approval, maybe. Validation, anything. He didn't find it. Clapton didn't say a word, just walked quietly toward the same amp he used before. He plugged in again, but this time he didn't start soft. He didn't have to prove anything anymore. What came next wasn't quiet, and it sure wasn't slow. The first note rang out like thunder. It wasn't messy. It was alive. It pushed and pulled, shook the air, but never lost its grip. It had edge, grit, but it also had shape. What the boy had played like a machine, Clapton played like a storm, loud but purposeful. The same solo, the same notes, but they bent deeper. They carried ache, truth. Somewhere in the middle, a woman near the back let out a sharp breath. One guy pulled his phone out and started filming without a word. Another covered his mouth. Chuck didn't blink. The guitar soared, then dipped, then roared back with a cry that sat in your chest like something familiar, like a name you'd forgotten how to say. Each note Clapton hit came with intent, space, emotion. The last note, long, bending, slow, hung in the air longer than it had any right to. And then, silence. No one dared to speak. No one moved. It was over. Clapton lifted his hand, tapped the top of the amp once, then unplugged. He didn't bow, didn't look for applause. He turned and started walking toward the exit. The boy stood there, guitar still in hand, shoulders slumped. His eyes were wide but unfocused. He wasn't looking at anything, not the amp, not the crowd, not even Clapton. Chuck walked over to him, stood beside him for a second before speaking. "You okay?" he asked. The boy didn't answer. Chuck looked down at the guitar in his hands. "That thing don't lie," he said. "It'll tell you the truth, whether you want to hear it or not." The boy swallowed hard. His voice, when it came, was small. "I thought I could beat him." Chuck didn't laugh, didn't mock, he just nodded slow. "You tried," he said. "Problem is, you were trying to beat him, not listen to him." Silence again. At the door, Clapton paused. He turned just enough to glance back at the kid. "I meant what I said earlier," he said, voice even. "You've got hands, but you've got to learn when to stop playing and start feeling." The boy looked up. "I wasn't trying to embarrass you," Clapton said. "Just show you that music doesn't care about your age or speed. It only cares if you mean it." Then he nodded once. The boy didn't speak for a long while. His hand slowly let go of the guitar neck. His shoulders dropped. And just like that, all that heat, the pride, the stubbornness, the showmanship, leaked right out of him. He looked small, not weak, just young, raw. He set the guitar down on the amp like it might shatter if he moved too fast, then turned to Chuck. The older man was standing a few feet away, arms crossed, one eyebrow slightly raised. The same look a grandfather gives a grandson when he falls off the bike for the third time and still insists he doesn't need training wheels. The boy met his eyes, didn't know what to say, so he asked a question without asking. Chuck saw it plain as day. "Son," Chuck said, slow and steady, "ego can move fast, but real music takes its time." The boy dropped his gaze. His jaw twitched once, then settled. "Can I start over?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Chuck didn't answer. Not right away, but someone else did. A pair of footsteps echoed across the shop floor, smooth, soft, steady. The boy turned and saw him. Clapton, standing there, not 20 feet away, hands loose at his sides. He looked the kid over. "If you're ready to listen," he said simply, "you can start again." There was no heat in his voice, no judgment, just truth, plain, straight, and patient. The boy nodded. "Can I try again?" he asked. Clapton's face didn't change much, but he nodded once, just enough to let the moment breathe. Chuck gave the boy a pat on the shoulder. "All right," he said. "This time, don't play to impress. Play to say something." The boy reached for the guitar again. This time, his fingers didn't fumble, but they didn't rush either. He sat down on the bench, not like a performer, but like someone settling into a quiet place they hadn't visited in a while. He took a deep breath, then started to play. The first few notes were simple, slow bends, soft plucks, no speed, no wild runs, just a handful of notes strung together one at a time. They weren't perfect, but they had space between them, space to feel. A woman near the acoustic guitars turned toward the sound. A man by the register put his phone away. No one clapped, but no one talked either. The boy kept going, eyes closed now. He wasn't trying to make a point. He wasn't thinking about Chuck or Clapton or the people watching. He just listened, to the strings, to his fingers, to whatever was sitting in his chest and hadn't had a way out until now. When he finished, he let the final note fade out. Then he opened his eyes, looked down at his hands, and exhaled, like he'd just put something down that had been heavy for a long time. He set the guitar on his lap and looked up. No applause, just a moment of peace. The silence wasn't empty. It was full. From the corner, a man in his 60s, gray beard, ball cap, flannel shirt, muttered to himself, "He's learning." Clapton didn't say anything, but he gave a quiet nod, almost like a teacher who didn't need to explain what a student had just done right. Chuck looked at Clapton, then back at the kid. "Well," he asked, "feel better?" The boy nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I do." He didn't smile, not yet, but he looked calm, real calm. Clapton stepped forward just a little, looked the boy in the eye. "You've got time," he said. "Don't rush it." The boy nodded again, and that was all. No lecture, no long speeches, just music and silence, and the space in between where learning lives. Chuck walked over and leaned against the bench beside the kid. "You know," he said, "back when I was doing fight scenes, we had this saying, didn't matter how fast you kicked or how loud you yelled. What mattered was when and why." He glanced at Clapton and smiled. "Same with guitar, I guess." Clapton chuckled softly. "Timing's everything." The boy looked at both of them. "Thanks," he said. Chuck raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For not walking away." Clapton didn't answer, but his eyes softened. He stepped over to the Stratocaster, unplugged the cable, and gently placed it back on the rack. Then he turned, gave one last nod toward the boy, and headed for the door. Chuck stayed a beat longer. The kid watched Clapton walk, watched like he was seeing something different now. Not just a legend, not a rival. A teacher, a mirror maybe. Clapton paused at the door, turned slightly. "Music doesn't need protecting," he said. "It knows who belongs." Then he pushed the door open and stepped into the fading afternoon light. The store stayed quiet for a long minute. No one really moved. The boy finally stood, gently placing the guitar back on the bench. He looked at it one last time before stepping away, hands in his pockets. Chuck walked alongside him. "Don't worry," he said. "You'll forget half this in a week." The boy looked confused. Chuck smiled. "But the feeling you had just now, you won't forget that. That's the part that sticks." They reached the front counter. The kid hesitated, then turned back toward the guitars. "I'm coming back here," he said. Chuck nodded. "Good. But next time, come to learn, not to prove something." The boy didn't argue, didn't need to. They stood together for a second, both of them quiet. Then Chuck said, "Now let's go find that drum set I promised my grandson before he thinks I ran off again." The boy let out a quiet laugh, the first real one all day, the kind that didn't carry tension, just truth, and maybe, just maybe, a beginning. It had been about 3 weeks since that afternoon in the music shop, but the boy, Ryan, still hadn't shaken it. He didn't want to. The ego had melted fast. All that noise and fire he thought made him special. It didn't hold up under the weight of truth. Not the kind you hear with your ears, but the kind that lands heavy on your chest and sits with you through the night. Now, he played different. Ryan sat on the edge of his bed, guitar in hand, knees bent inward, a soft bend forming on the low G string. Nothing wild, nothing sharp. Just slow pressure, the way Clapton had played that day. Like the note wasn't just sound, but memory. He wasn't trying to shred anymore. Not right now. His earbuds were in. Tears in Heaven was on repeat, barely loud enough to block the outside world, but clear enough to make his fingers pause at all the right places. That song hit different now. Not just because it was Clapton's, but because of everything it wasn't trying to be. His room was quiet, just the click of the metronome, the hum of a desk fan in the corner, and that sweet, steady practice bend. His left wrist ached slightly, not from overwork, but from paying attention. On the desk beside him sat a small photo. It wasn't even framed, just a 4x6 print he'd picked up at the drugstore down the block. In it, Ryan, Chuck Norris, and Eric Clapton, all standing in front of the guitar shop. Clapton had a half smile. Chuck was mid-laugh. Ryan, in that photo, had a face full of confusion and gratitude that hadn't quite settled into something he could name. Under the photo, scribbled in black Sharpie, was a line Clapton had said that day before walking away. "Don't just play the notes, tell the story." That line was what stuck. Every time Ryan picked up the guitar now, he asked himself the same thing. What story am I telling? It didn't always come out clean. Some days he still reached too far, played too fast. But when he caught himself, he'd stop. Breathe. Start again. It was working. Slowly. Sure. But it was working. And then came the invitation. It was a random Tuesday when the email arrived. The subject line just said, "You've been chosen to headline The Soul of Strings." At first, Ryan thought it was junk mail. But as he clicked and read further, his eyes widened. His music had been circling online. Covers, original ballads, short instrumental clips. Enough people had noticed. One of his recent live clips, filmed in a small bar in Austin, had hit just right. The show's organizers had been watching. They didn't just want him to play. They wanted him to open and close the whole damn thing. A year later, the stadium lights were unbearable. The place was packed, sold out. Thousands of people. LED panels glowing on every wall. Smoke machines puffed just enough haze to make everything feel dreamlike. Ryan stood behind the curtain, eyes closed, guitar strapped on. His hands were calm, not cold, not sweaty, just ready. Back in the VIP section, Eric Clapton adjusted the collar of his coat and looked around the packed venue. "Place is huge," he muttered. Chuck Norris, sitting next to him, sipped a plastic cup of watered-down soda and nodded. "Didn't think they still built them like this." Clapton leaned over. "Remind me, who's this kid again?" Chuck shrugged. "No clue. My granddaughter's been talking about him all week." Behind them, a teenage girl leaned forward in her seat, wide-eyed. "Grandpa, that's Ryan Sloan," she whispered, like saying it louder would somehow make it untrue. "He's blowing up right now. He writes his own stuff. Totally original." Chuck blinked. "That's his name?" "Yeah, didn't you read the poster?" Chuck leaned back in his chair, exchanged a look with Clapton. Clapton chuckled. "Guess we're behind the times." The lights dimmed. A hush rolled over the stadium like a slow tide. Then, spotlight. Ryan stepped into it. He looked taller now, more grown. His hair was tied back neatly, and his black shirt hung loose but clean. The Stratocaster slung across his body wasn't new, but it looked cared for. It looked loved. He stepped up to the mic. "Evening, folks," he said, his voice low, calm. He paused. "I know you're here for the music, and you'll get that. But before I play, there's something I need to say." The crowd quieted. The band behind him stood still. Ryan looked up, straight into the VIP box. "In the crowd tonight," he said, "are two men who have no idea what they did for me." Spotlights shifted. Chuck sat up straighter. Clapton tilted his head. Ryan continued. "I used to play guitar like it owed me something, like it was supposed to shout for me. I didn't know how to shut up and listen." People leaned in. He swallowed. "Then one day, in a little shop, I ran my mouth to the wrong man, and another man stepped in, not to fight me, but to stop me from digging deeper." He smiled. "Those two men didn't teach me how to play guitar." He paused. "They taught me how to be still. How to play with something instead of over it. How to let the music speak for itself." Spotlights now hit Clapton and Chuck. People clapped, confused but touched. Ryan's voice cracked a little as he said, "Eric Clapton, you showed me a single note can carry a lifetime. Chuck Norris, you didn't throw a punch, but I've never felt more knocked straight." The crowd gasped. Some clapped slowly. Others turned to look at the two older men, eyes wide. Chuck's jaw tightened. His granddaughter put a hand over her mouth. Clapton blinked once, then again, slowly. Ryan continued. "I came here to play my music, but I owe it all to their music and to their patience." He took one more breath. "This first piece is for them." He stepped back, guitar in hand. Then came the bend, slow, familiar, almost sacred. It was the same bend Clapton had played all those months ago. But now, it was his. Ryan's ballad wasn't complicated. No wild solos, no fireworks. It rose and fell with emotion, bending like tree branches in soft wind, and yet, it was strong. It meant something. Clapton sat still, his eyes moist. Chuck didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Midway through the song, a few folks stood up. By the final chord, half the stadium was silent, not because they didn't want to cheer, but because they were still feeling it. Ryan set his guitar down gently. He walked to the mic once more. "I don't just play the notes anymore," he said. "I tell the story. A beat. And tonight, I told the story to the first two people who ever listened." The crowd erupted. Clapton looked over at Chuck. "That's the kid," he said softly. Chuck just smiled, shook his head once. "Damn," he muttered. "I knew it the minute he stopped trying to be loud." Ryan waved to the crowd, then turned back to the band. "One more?" he asked. The crowd roared back, "Yeah!" So he nodded. Guitar in hand, he stepped to the mic, then leaned in just enough for the front row to hear. "This last one's not a song." He smiled. "It's a thank you." And he played. No words, just strings, just heart. The kind of song that doesn't end when the sound fades. The kind that sticks around. The kind that doesn't ask to be remembered, but is. And up in the VIP seats, two old friends sat side by side listening. Not clapping, not talking, just letting the music breathe. And hey, before we wrap up today's story, I just want to say this loud and clear. This story isn't real. Ryan Sloan, the showdown in the guitar shop, even that quiet afternoon with Clapton and Chuck Norris, all made up. But you know what is real? The message. This story, though fictional, is packed with real-life weight. It reminds us that speed, skill, and flash mean nothing if there's no soul behind them. That music, like life, isn't about proving yourself louder or faster. It's about listening, feeling, growing. Ryan, that cocky, loud-mouthed kid, could have stayed on that path of ego and noise, but he got humbled. And what's more powerful than talent? humility. That moment when he chose to learn instead of compete. That's what made him special. That's when he started becoming an artist. Clapton didn't have to raise his voice. Chuck didn't throw a punch. They just showed up, stood firm, and let wisdom do the talking. That's something we could all learn from, no matter how old we are, no matter what we do. This story is about more than music. It's about respect, growth, and how sometimes it takes a quiet legend and a cowboy with a coffee to steer a loud kid in the right direction. So if this story hit you like it hit me, drop a comment below. What was your favorite moment? Did it remind you of someone? Or maybe a lesson you learned the hard way? Let's talk about it. You and me, down in the comments. And until next time, keep listening, keep growing, and never stop telling your story. Peace.